Hi everyone, so I wanted to go ahead and make this video about a year and a half ago, but I just had not had the time. So I finally got it all together and wanted to give you some insight into what my NCL cruise was like at the end of 2022 around the Mediterranean. I'm not a travel agent, I'm just someone who loves to travel and loves cruising. So here is my insight into how the entire experience went, which excursions we really enjoyed, which ones we probably wouldn't do again. I hope that you enjoy this video, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We left for our cruise from the Atlanta airport and flew into Barcelona. The flight was long, but luckily we had really great service and it was included in the package itself. Here's just a little clip of us all actually heading to the shuttle from the airport, which took us from the airport to the cruise itself. And then here was our first glimpse at the cruise. We were absolutely in love with just sort of the way that they had the whole ship designed and the separate areas. Now, we were lucky enough to get to stay in Haven on this, so here are a few shots of the Haven menu and just the little secluded areas as well as our room. You see here we had a separate living area in addition to the main bedroom, a full bath including a bathtub and two vanities, as well as a walk-in shower, so that was absolutely luxurious. Here's a little bit of the rest of the ship as well. We did a lot of exploring our first day, which was a lot of fun, just because there wasn't too much going on activity-wise, so we wanted to get a good idea of what the ship layout was like, and so lots of exploring and walking. If you have not been on a cruise before, know that you are going to eat a lot and you are going to walk a lot, especially if you do what we did and decide to never take an elevator. We had such a nice time just sort of going around and getting familiar with the Norwegian Epic. It's a great ship, and really we liked the layout. It felt very modern compared to a lot of the cruise ships we've been on. The food was good, the service was great. You'll see we eat a lot and go to a lot of different activities throughout because that was what our group decided was a lot of fun. We also went to several shows in the evenings where they had live music, and the performers were really talented. I've been on cruise ships where, you know, it's kind of hit or miss, and in general we were really impressed. Yay! Alright, where are we headed today, Eric?
We're going to France.
What part of France? We don't know how to pronounce it, but that's where we're headed. Yay! Alright. Our first full excursion day took place in France, right outside of the town of Monte Carlo, and we were incredibly blown away. It was such a strong start to the trip. Even though the weather was not ideal, we had sort of gray clouds throughout. It was one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life. We were, like I said, in the Monte Carlo area, so the architecture and the wealth of the area just sort of blew us away. There was so much to see, and there were so many great places to visit. We got to go to a residential area where our tour guide was telling us homes sell for somewhere, it was either $1 million a square foot or $100,000 a square foot. Either way, totally absurd, and that just gives you an idea of how luxurious and wealthy this area feels, minus the little touristy pockets, of course. So the views were amazing. We really had a great time just sort of exploring the city and looking at all the architecture, and you know, sure, we stopped for a few souvenirs as well, so if you do visit, know you should have a chance to do that. Also, we got some delicious food at this little diner, and we got a variety, and all of it was good. So I definitely think that they had some great food options if you're looking on your own trip. So then we just continued exploring. We had 2 hours of free time this excursion, so we got to wander around and learn a little bit about places like the casino and the yacht port that they have there, where it was like $100,000 a night to keep your yacht there for the big like festival that they do each year. So we just kept hearing all of these crazy statistics, and it was so interesting to learn about a place that is so different than the United States and than Georgia. So it was just a really great trip. I'm so glad that we got to go and visit. This stop was actually one of my favorites of the entire trip. So our next day off the ship, we were in Italy. So we went ahead and jumped from France to Italy. We started the day off strong with one of the complimentary breakfast restaurants, and then we jumped off the ship and started heading toward our excursion for the day. Now we did have a pretty long bus ride for this one because we were going out to one of the vineyards. That was the whole excursion, was we learned how they make wine, we got a tour of the vineyard, and then of course they gave us some sort of samples and all of that, and it just made for a very fun day. Now I'm really not much of a drinker myself, but the food itself was really fun, and even though I'm not a drinker, I would still say it was a really good choice for the excursion, just because they explained really well a huge part of the culture there and the agricultural industry, and we got some great food to go along with it. Now here's us back at the ship, just sort of enjoying some different desserts and all of that. It was a pretty short day overall. Our next day in Naples was probably one of my favorite of the whole trip, just because we did so many things, and a lot of it was very, very memorable. So if you do go to Naples, make sure that you make time to get off the ship, because there's just so much incredible history all around and so many beautiful things to see. In general, Italy just blew us away with its natural beauty. Even when we were on the coach buses, which took us from place to place, normally that can feel very boring, but I kept getting my phone out and videoing because everything was just so beautiful. So for this excursion, we started at this like farm to table style restaurant. They grow all of their own ingredients, and then they make like cheese and food and drinks and all of that. So they did all these demonstrations on how they actually make them, and it's all very traditional food from what they were saying. So we really got another sort of insight into Italian culture, and we got to see all of the animals that they have on their farm as well. So that was just a lot of fun, whether you're going as a couple or a family. It was just a really interesting sort of side trip, and it was only the first thing that we did. So after we finished up at the farm with lunch, we then also got to go into the city, where we got to explore some shops and see some handmade wooden objects and all sorts of like hand-carved things. We had a chance to go and look at the ocean and just sort of explore the city for about 45 minutes to an hour on our own before meeting back up. There were all sorts of things you could do. You could ride little horse carriages, you could buy souvenirs, so make sure you build in some free time for yourself. Then we made it to Pompeii. This was a really cool monument to see, just because you hear so much about it, but to see it in person and see how much is left after such a crazy, awful catastrophe was incredibly interesting. And also to see just sort of the way it was all designed, and the Colosseum and all of the different like rooms, that it really made it feel so much more real that people had actually lived here before it was destroyed. Plus what was left behind was beautiful. So I would highly recommend visiting this if you do get the chance to visit. It was also wild because, as you'll see throughout the rest of this video, there were just cats and dogs and stuff just sort of around anytime we went anywhere. Day 5 was one of my personal favorites of the trip, and it's one that I remember the most clearly after coming home. We had just so much fun as a group that day. You can just see everyone was kind of in a goofy, silly mood. The weather was gorgeous, so we got so lucky as we were exploring this beautiful city that the weather decided to cooperate as well. We got sunshine all day, which just accentuated further the natural beauty that was all around us. We did quite a bit of driving this day too, so again, it was very grateful that it was an easy place to look at even while on a bus. So we started out by going to the town itself, and while we were sort of walking around and looking at the architecture of the city, we got to see all sorts of chapels and residential areas and just sort of explore what it looked like as a city as a whole. This part was fine. Like we had a great tour, we got to enjoy looking at everything, and this was very cool. It was a stop that we took to see another sort of Colosseum. And it was very interesting just to see more ruins, especially after having seen Pompeii the day before. So seeing those as a comparison was very, very interesting. Although I will say my favorite part of the day came in the second part when we had a little bit more free time. That was actually a trend that continued for us throughout the trip. We really enjoyed having time to explore on our own just because the area was so incredibly beautiful, and it felt even more special when we could do what we wanted to and see the kinds of things that interested us. Now, we'll tell the story of what happened in this coffee shop a little bit later, but just remember, my advice to you is if you want coffee in Italy, do not order a latte, because latte means milk, and I ended up getting a cup of just milk throughout. So don't do what I did, learn from my mistakes. Here is us driving up to Mount Etna. We actually got to eat at a beautiful and delicious restaurant on top of the mountain, which was a very cool experience. The food was fine, but just being able to eat in such an interesting place was very cool. Mount Etna is a volcanic mountain, as you can see by the color of the soil all around. So we got to walk around and see. It was kind of a precarious drive up, so just be aware of that if you do decide to go, that you really do need to trust your bus driver, because they are zooming up these crazy turns on the mountain. Now, this is a really great photo opportunity, but my other thing is, just as the bus needs to be careful when it's driving up, make sure you are being careful, because I just about got scared to death when one of my friends was trying to climb to the top and get a good picture up there. I thought for sure he was going to fall to his death, so just be careful. But also, this is one of my favorite memories just because it was so fun for us all to explore. It really was great for photo ops. Sorry, terrible videography, because I thought he was falling down the mountain. So there you go. But yeah, this was one of the most memorable days for us. So if you get to go and try out the restaurant on top of Mount Etna and explore, I highly do recommend, because that was a highlight for us of this trip. Here I want to show you a little bit more about the kinds of activities that we did when we were on the ship itself. Again, we did live music with dancing, there's shuffleboard, there's chess. We did all sorts of crosswords throughout the trip. We ate and ate and ate, and the food was always very good. We did several specialty restaurants, but we also mostly ate at the included food places, and that was totally fine too. Like, we had really good gourmet experiences even at those. We spent day 6 in Malta, and it was another really beautiful day, although I will say that most of the fun we had this day came from, again, the free time that we were given. We had really great excursions throughout this trip, although I will say, if you like to stay busy the way that we do, I would try to build in pockets of free time so that you can explore what you want, because occasionally our more history-laden ones felt a little bit slower paced, and we felt more like we were walking along very slowly versus exploring the one day we had in each city. So we really enjoyed the free time we had here. We got to take lots of cool photos and videos and see the town of Malta after learning some history. We also got to have some delicious lunch and a gondola ride here, both of which were very memorable. So if you have time to build in those activities, those are things that I definitely recommend. They have these cannons all throughout the street, so very cool place for interesting like history and photo opportunities and all of that. So in general, I would highly recommend a stop in Malta if you can. Although again, most of the fun we had was sort of designed by us. So do make sure that you either choose an excursion that gives you plenty of free time, or know that, if you're doing one of the more history-based ones, just make sure that that's something that seems fun to you. Here is us trying kini. I believe that's what it was called. And octopus. So I had pulpo in Spain, and this was just as delicious. They did a really good preparation of it, so definitely try it if you end up feeling very brave when you're going there. We had a lot of fun, and that's one of the more memorable things we did throughout the trip because no one else had it before. So here's just sort of a look at the fisherman town that we ended up in, and then of course we had to drive back to the ship. So here's just a little bit more of the kinds of things that we were seeing while we were on our drive. You can see it's not quite as just majestically beautiful as some of the places we saw in Italy. But we did have lots of fun back on the ship. The Norwegian Epic does have a rock climbing course, and they didn't charge us for it, which I thought was great. Sometimes they can feel a little penny pinching on NCL for some of those activities, so that was lots of fun. We played more chess, and then we saw the magician, so that was a lot. It was a very, very cool show. And then after that, actually, they had this incredible act with the acrobatic people on the ship. They did a really wonderful job. Day 7 took us into Corfu, Greece, and I was definitely blown away with the beauty of Greece as well, although I will say that if you can only choose one, I would recommend visiting probably Italy over Greece, although that may have been due to the excursions we chose, or, you know, something like that. We just had such an incredible job in Italy that almost nothing could have topped it, and while we had a great time in Greece as well, I have a lot more memories from the Italy part of the cruise versus Greece. So here you see us walking through the city during our free time. There were all sorts of souvenir shops and things like that, but we were on the search for a deck of cards for probably an hour. We try to get a deck of cards in every port that we visit, and we just could not for the life of us find anything like that. So just keep in mind that they have more maybe real shops versus souvenir shops. At least we could not find what we were looking for. So as we continued exploring, we got to just see the generally beautiful, interesting architecture of Greece. We also got to see, we were right by the ocean, so we ended up stopping oceanside for lunch as well, and there were cats everywhere. I mean, this was the day of our trip where we probably saw just the most cats. There was, I think she was saying, like actually a problem in Greece of feral cats, but all of them were very, very friendly. We could see that some were related, and apparently they do a lot of like catching and releasing. In Greece, they try to spay the cats when possible, because there were just so many. I mean, we would look and there would be like 6 cats all of a sudden. So if you are a cat lover, bring treats. That's something I wish that I had done after we left, because it was very fun to just see lots of cats throughout the trip. So here is us walking down to the oceanside restaurant where we got to have lunch. It was a lovely sit-down meal with delicious food. Every single meal that we ate on this trip was honestly great, especially the ones off the ship, just because they were traditional European or modern European meals, and they were just so well done. The chefs were incredible, and we did not have one bad meal off the ship the entire time. And honestly, the food on the ship was great too. It was just your more typical American style fare, so it wasn't quite as memorable. They do have ping pong on board the NCL, so if that's something that you think you'd enjoy, make sure that you find the tables early on. We were able to stop by pretty often, and here you'll see us eating at Oceans as well. That's another stop that we spent quite a bit of time at. Sometimes we would get a little bit tired of the main food, so here is us also trying out the teppanyaki grill. We had so much fun here, so we even got to sing along. I'll let you hear a little bit of that.
Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home, country road.
Obviously no singing awards for any of us, but it was a ton of fun, so highly recommend stopping by if you have the chance. Here is the next day, day 8. We ended up starting the day with breakfast and then making origami flowers in the main area. They'll sometimes do origami classes and stuff like that. Here's us doing a dance class as well. Eric and I are big dancers, so we always try to do those whenever we get the chance, and they had a really fun instructor. So just if you are an activity person, just never feel shy about doing any of the activities. They make it so much more fun when you have like a schedule to kind of keep to, at least if you like to be busy like me. If you like to relax, then ignore me and do whatever you'd like. Bring a book, do whatever you'd like. But here is us getting off the ship for this day. Again, we were back to just incredibly striking views as we drove everywhere, and then we got to see more ancient architecture. This was one of the more iconic style days. I mean, you see this town on all sorts of postcards and all over, so it was really interesting to see those white capped buildings. We also stopped for frozen yogurt, which was just a fun treat and which was fun for us. We saw, again, more stray dogs, more stray cats. They were truly everywhere. So if you are an animal lover, just go to Greece and watch all of these animals who are out and about and having a good old time. We really enjoyed just sort of seeing all sorts of animals along our trip. It was mostly cats with the occasional dog. And then of course the architecture itself was beautiful. When we finished up with that part, we actually had this dinner planned through the ship where I think it was like a traditional Greek festival style dinner or something like that. We knew going in that we were going to get to throw plates and that there was going to be a traditional Greek sort of dance performance that we were going to get to watch in addition to the buffet of food. So we were actually really excited about all of this. Now, the dancing was, you know, it was not the best performance we saw. We saw so many great performers on the ship and throughout our trip that, you know, it was interesting and the plate throwing was fun, but it was definitely very touristy. So it was wild, and you can see, I mean, that guy is talented. He is getting his legs up there. But as far as overall, I would just say that that was one of the more gimmicky things that we did on the trip, if you're looking to book one yourself. Then after dinner, it was time to get back to the ship, and this is where an adventure sort of began. We actually had to go, like, we were told by our tour guide to go back to the shuttle, and then when we finally got into the shuttle line, we found out that it was a 90-minute wait for the little gondola that would take you down. So we decided we were going to walk down the stairs instead. I'm sorry the lighting is so bad on this, and I sped it up because it took us 30 minutes to walk down all of these stairs. But as you'll hear in one of the little stories, bonus little things at the end of this video, it was really fun. It was actually one of the highlights of our trip. We were laughing, we were worried we were gonna miss the ship. Like, it was like the most frantic 30 minutes of walking downstairs that you've ever seen. So we were very happy to make it. You can see how high above that city is. We walked downstairs that took us from where those lights were all the way back down, and we made a ship and we made it back on the boat. So we did that, and it was really memorable. On day 9, we got to go to Athens, and I remember leading up to the trip, this was one of the days that we were all most excited about because Athens is such an iconic city. So there was a lot of excitement leading up to this day, and it definitely was a very memorable day, although for food in the end, not so much what we saw in Athens. We ended up booking a tour that took us to the Acropolis Museum, and I think when we were signing up, we got a little bit confused because we really thought we were going to go see the Acropolis as well. So, you know, we took all this time walking through this beautiful city, which we really enjoyed. We got to see so many different things, but then we ended up at the Acropolis Museum, which was incredibly interesting and is actually built over some ruins. So they have glass floors everywhere so that you can still see down there. So don't be like me, don't wear a dress when you go there, because that was just, you know, I just kind of had to commit and be very careful. So if you are taking my advice, just wear pants that day and you'll feel a lot more comfortable. We saw all sorts of beautiful art, and we had a really good tour guide this day, so she taught us all sorts of things about pieces in the museum. But I know that a few people in our group were definitely disappointed that we didn't actually get to see the Acropolis itself. It is right across the way from this museum, but they didn't interact. So just pay close attention to the excursion that you choose to book if you end up going on a similar trip. There's the Acropolis itself, and anyway, once we finished up with the museum, we ended up driving out to another part of the city. Here's a little bit just of what the drive looked like. It was definitely like being in a city, and we got to see some incredible landmarks along the way that felt very European and felt very special. So even though it was like being in a city, it was like being in an old city. Now here is the restaurant. You'll see that it was like all open for the most part to the world around. So that was very cool. It was an incredible restaurant. This was probably the best meal we had the entire trip. They made it right in front of us. You can see the guy chopping tomatoes here, and they explained every single part of the process and took things around for us to try the raw ingredients so that when they combined it all together, we could actually taste it coming together, and they explained why they use certain things and what made them special. So this was the best best meal we had the entire trip. It was incredible as well as incredibly memorable just because it was so unique and special. And all of the food was so fresh and thoughtfully prepared. Plus, we got to see them doing it. So it was just very, very cool. Like I said, this was what made this day very special. So when we were back on the boat, you can just see how beautiful it is even at night. Like, I cannot believe that I, with my little iPhone camera, am able to see this much beauty in a city. Like, it was so cool. And I forgot this was Halloween too. So they did a sort of trick-or-treating thing for the kids in the buffet area, and you could also see they had those carved pumpkins. But we ended up having a very luxurious dinner in the Haven restaurant this evening, just Eric and I. You can see here we got, I think that was the steelhead trout, and then I got the surf and turf, which was really, really good. We had all sorts of delicious food on the trip, but the best food was always in the Haven restaurant, even better than the specialties. So here is me trying to get a film of us all going through the Halloween haunted house. Now, I got rid of the sound on this because it's all me screaming, but we had a really fun Halloween. They made it really special. And then that actually led into our day at sea, where we just sort of hung out and went to as many activities as possible. Plus, we continued playing things like chess and ping pong and all of those sorts of games that we've really been enjoying throughout the trip. There really was so much to do on the ship, and we got really lucky because there weren't that many people on board this voyage that wanted to take part in the activities. So we got to do pretty much whatever we wanted whenever we wanted, which made for a lot of fun. Plus, we never had any trouble getting seated at any restaurants, so we really just had a blast. Like, I'm glad that we didn't go on a trip where every single day was at sea, because I think we would have gotten a little bit bored, but there was always something to watch or do, and that just made the time pass by so quickly. We had fun with origami, we did all the crosswords every day. If you like the crosswords, make sure you find them in the library. Plus, they have board games up in the in that sort of area too. Or if that's not your style, you can go to shows like Mr. Sexy Legs. We saw some wild shows, and there are some things I will never be able to unsee for sure, but it was a ton of fun. We generally just sort of goofed around on the at sea days, and you can see everyone is just living their best life, doing everything they can. So here is just a little bit more of a few little shots of the kinds of things that we spent our time doing. You'd be surprised at how many fun things you can fit into a day when you have a whole day at sea on a ship filled with tons of fun activities and where you can eat constantly. So that's basically what we ended up doing. Be sure to watch the Perfect Couple game show if you like to laugh. We always enjoy this show, and I like that they always choose usually an older couple and a middle-aged couple, and then usually newlyweds. So with that day, we had to disembark. We had to go home, which, was bittersweet. We had such an incredible trip that we were definitely sad to see it end, but we were also ready to go home because we did a pretty long trip on this one, and we'd been away from our cats and family for so long. So here is Eric explaining everything that we had to go through to get his suitcase back. They actually got it mixed up, but we did get it back in the end. So that's exciting, but it was definitely crazy. And then here is us getting to the Italian airport. Now, I will say this was the worst airport experience we've ever had. There were no attendants at the gate for a really long time, so just be prepared for that. It was super different than flying in the United States. They only got there like 40 minutes before the flight, so just give yourself time for potential just issues and stuff like that that are out of your control. We did land in Amsterdam for our connection, and that, on the other hand, is the best airport I've ever been to. Here's a little video of it here. If you ever get the chance to fly into Amsterdam, I highly recommend it. We had such a great experience, and they had fun food. It was beautiful, and here are some of our favorite memories.
Okay, that was epic. Let's see. My favorite off the boat is probably, it's about to happen as we get off the boat. I really liked when we went to Santorini, even though it was a really sad place, and the food was sad, and the dancing was sad. At the very end, everyone wanted to do the gondolas, but I told them that was never the right idea, and then we realized there was a 90-minute wait for the gondolas. And instead of waiting for 90 minutes, we spent 30 minutes walking downstairs and dodging donkey poop and singing in the dark. It was very dark, but yeah, that was a good time. On the boat, I don't know, there was a lot of fun things. I really liked all the activities when people were like up and at 'em. There was always like crazy old men dancing, and, like weird things. There wasn't too many things on the boat, but those are the ones that jump out on me that other people haven't already said. So, yay, that was epic.
Alright, so Kate's asked us to do these little documentary things about what we like most on or off the ship. I'll do one from each. On the ship, I think teppanyaki was one of my favorites. It was one of the specialty dinners we did, and it was a very interesting take on hibachi. He started singing the entire time he was cooking and had us join it as well, so we had a good time there. The food was also pretty good, so it's a good time around. Off the ship, outside of Latte, which I'll also mention, Corfu, I think, was one of my favorites. We got to go through a whole palace, eat at a sailing club, and then also got a nice tour of the actual town rather than just sightseeing places. It was also the one that I finished on my every day of staying. I could live here. That was the one that I kind of stopped at. Latte happened before Corfu. We went to the top of one of the theaters in, where was it?
I don't remember. It was somewhere in Italy, though.
Or something like that.
Probably.
And Kate decided she wanted a coffee. So we went to the cafe, got some desserts, got some orange juice for Eric and I, and then Kate decided to confuse the waiter and said coffee, and then said latte, which we learned in French or Italian. That was Italy, right?
Yeah.
Italy. Just means milk. So going back and forth, him saying cafe and her saying latte, she got 2 warm glasses of milk and then proceeded to trip over a bag going down an umbrella and spilled them right next to another group of people, losing her milk.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think overall a really good cruise. I've done many before, and this was the first Europe one, so kind of jumps to the top for me.
I don't have anything prepared, but I do think that my favorite memory the whole time, I'll let someone else tell probably my top favorite memory. Latte is what they're going to reference, but another thing that I really enjoyed was one night we were all playing ping pong, and it was so incredibly windy that literally every time a ping pong ball would fly, Eric would have to go full sprint chasing it down the other direction because it would get caught in this wind draft. So it was so funny that we were all just dying laughing, and it was such a nice way to, because the part on the ship was sometimes a little less exciting and stuff like that, it was just a really fun way to spend time together. So, yeah.
So it's my turn to go talk about what my favorite time on the ship was. And honestly, I think my favorite time on the ship was actually off the ship on the excursions. Specifically, I had a really good time kind of going off on our own, even though it wasn't my favorite location, Santorini. I liked going off and exploring like the upper part of it. We ran by a wedding and tried not to crash it. And it was honestly really beautiful, breathtaking views, and I really enjoyed it.